The gigantic government sucks. Pursuit of happiness radio is deluxe. Liberty and freedom will make you smile. The pursuit of happiness on your radio dial. Just as cheeseburgers and liberty fries, it's pursuit of happiness time.
Hey. Where are we here? Let's start with this. Grocery chains Kroger and Albertson are heading to court to defend their planned $24.6 billion merger from antitrust allegations. To put that number into perspective, if you shopped at one of their stores with $24.6 billion, you could have purchased up to 4 avocados. So, yeah, now it all makes sense, right? Math is racist. Hi, I'm Kenny Webster. Hopefully you're not a racist if you're watching or listening to this right now. We're live on social media, but we're also live on KPRC 950 in Houston, kprcradio.com, 94.53 HD on your FM dial. You can also subscribe to a podcast of this radio show and find me on various social media platforms, as long as we're allowed to be on them. In fact, we're going to talk about that this afternoon. Coming up in a little bit, we're going to talk about censorship on social media and a very unlikely person to come out and criticize it. Somebody from the left is now defending people like you and Donald Trump and so many other people. Someone you wouldn't have expected. I think someone doing it all a bit reluctantly, but who knows? People have a change of heart sometimes, so we'll talk about that. Daniel Turner will be here this afternoon from Power the Future. Those of you on Twitter might know who that is. Daniel Turner is an author and an activist, and he just published an article. We actually know what one of Kamala Harris's policies are now, and it involves gas stoves. Spoiler alert, she didn't want you to have one, so stick around for that. And Michael Quinn Sullivan stopping by from TexasScorecard.com. 300,000 migrant children are missing right now. It is pretty disgusting, and it happened not under Donald Trump's watch, under the Biden watch. In fact, while we're going to end the show with that, I think in a way we'll also start the show with it. I want to start off by talking about border security. Kamala Harris and Axios, the liberal media, lie to you. They are lying liars who lie for a living, and they get paid for it, and they get paid very generously. Axios has an article today. Well, this was published a little over a week ago. The headline reads as follows: Harris border confusion haunts her new campaign. What? It haunts her new campaign. And then the article goes on to explain how she was never really the border czar. Now, not surprisingly, not long after publishing this, Axios got flagged on the only social media network that I think most people have access to, Twitter. Yeah, people are on Telegram and Rumble and stuff, but those platforms aren't quite as popular as X or Twitter. Axios got hit with a community note for lying about Kamala Harris being the border czar earlier this summer, and it couldn't have come at a better time. I think it was much needed. Kamala Harris, just this week, suddenly, very important for her to defend the border. Oh, it's so important. In fact, if you're a resident of Texas, like I am, you may recall last week, Colin Allred, Ted Cruz's opponent, was reading off a list of some of his policy positions. We played this soundbite on the show yesterday, so I won't bore you with it again. But Colin Allred, basically concussion Beto, I like to call him, the former NFL football player that lives up in Dallas. He's no Beto O'Rourke, so the media doesn't love him like they did Beto, but it doesn't matter. I think he's still going to lose to Ted Cruz. He's reading his policy positions last week at the Democrat National Convention, and he's listing off all the stuff you'd expect him to say. We need more abortions and more rights for trans people. And then they're, yay, abortions, trans. And then he gets to border security. And let's secure the border. You could have heard a pin drop in the giant stadium where they were having the DNC convention. People didn't know what to think. I'm sorry, what? We're secure the border. Am I at the wrong convention? No, you're at the right convention, but you couldn't blame people for being confused because the leader of this political party, one Kamala Harris, had a very different stance on border security just a short time ago. Here she is 4 years ago running for president before Joe Biden secured the nomination.
This issue is about a vanity project for this president.
Right. Donald Trump.
And it is a problem of his own making.
Right.
And listen, when I travel this country, folks have plenty enough problems that they need their president to focus on, instead of a wall that, by the way, because I was a prosecutor for many years, including the Attorney General of California, I specialize on transnational criminal organizations.
Yeah.
That wall ain't going to stop them.
No.
Hilarious. No, we don't need to build a wall. Why would Guys, why would we build a wall? Walls are racist. It's a vanity project, yada, yada, yada. So Biden takes over. We all remember what happened in 2020. Whatever you think of the election results, I think you'd agree the Biden team is currently in charge right now. Biden and Kamala decided that Donald Trump's border wall, it didn't need to be completed. Heck, we could disassemble it.
It reveals a construction zone frozen in time. Steel border wall bollards are left in stacks, and construction equipment sits on staging grounds. Just weeks before President Biden was inaugurated, the Trump administration pushed ahead to build a 4-mile stretch of new border wall into the Patagonia Mountains. This is the end of the road, about 15 miles east of Nogales, Arizona. This is as far as the border wall construction got. And what you see now is this carved out path sitting next to the pristine, untouched landscape.
A giant cliff that you could fall off of, and boy, that really unintentionally became kind of a metaphor for Joe Biden's whole presidency, didn't it? At any rate, now Kamala's bee's knees about border security. She just loves it. She wants to secure that border. Let's get rid of all these illegal immigrants. Well, okay, well, maybe they're not going that far, but you don't have to look at Axios every day to understand how absurd and ridiculous this is. The editors at Breitbart put a pretty good summary of it together, and basically what they pointed out here is the people at Axios are sheep or gerbils or, whatever, pick whatever kind of a vegan mammal you want them to be. They're spreading this absurd lie that President Cackly McNever Borders are, as John Nolte put it, is now in favor of completing Trump's southern border wall. What? 4 years ago, you hated it. I don't understand. Why is it okay now? Hell, look, a couple of months ago, they were all laughing at Donald Trump for his idea about having no taxes for people working in the service industry getting paid in tips. And now they love that idea, too. So if all they're going to do is borrow Donald Trump's policies, it begs the question, why don't you just vote for Donald Trump? Because Trump evil, red hat bad, orange man no good. Anyway, if you work at the Axios office, it is my understanding to the people that work there that apparently when they walk in the door, there's like a little cubby and they put their self-respect in the cubby and then they walk in and they're all in cubicles or whatever. But anyway, this lying headline they just published reads, Harris flip-flops on building the border wall. I'll read a little bit more to you because I do love satire, although I'm told that this is actually quite serious and they're not kidding. They said, quote, if she's elected president, Kamala Harris pledges to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the wall along the southern border, a project she once opposed and called un-American. Guys, even when they're trying to help protect her narrative by giving you little glimpses of what the truth is, they're still basically lying here. As you'll see here, Axios accidentally admits in its own headline that this is a lie. This is what happens when you're a professional gerbil or sheep or lemming or whatever it is that they are. The entire lie has been constructed to make Kamala Harris seem like a normal, reasonable person, right? But she's not. This is the same woman that flip-flopped on Medicare for all, for example. She's lying about this just like she lies about everything else. When she gets into office, if she wins, do you think she's going to finish building that border wall? That border wall that would prevent future Democrat voters from getting into the country? That border wall that would prevent the CEOs of giant faceless corporations from hiring lots of cheap labor, the very same CEOs that are actually funding her campaign right now? No, she's not going to do that. Kamala hasn't actually personally said anything about reversing these positions. These are all things that we're hearing from people in her campaign, people that are stumping for Kamala. But Kamala's not actually telling us this. And let's not forget that her campaign even said she reversed her support for mass amnesty for what could be up to 30 million illegal Democrats, basically decriminalizing illegal immigration. And as we're going to discuss later in the show, 300,000 migrant kids are missing right now because of Kamala Harris's reckless border policies. So you tell me, do you think she's being sincere? Look, the sheep's clothing for this bald-faced lie that Kamala is suddenly in favor of completing Trump's border wall is what's officially called the Emergency National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. The Emergency National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. I like Ted Cruz's more accurate description of it, that this is total bullcrap. And he's right. This is the Orwellian named bill from the same people that brought us the Inflation Reduction Act, or what was it? The Affordable Care Act, two laws that neither reduced inflation nor did they make healthcare more affordable, and now they're giving us the Emergency National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act that would actually allow 35,000 illegal aliens to enter our country every week before triggering additional border controls. That's 1.8 million illegals per year. That's their compromise. That's the reason why they say they want border security and Republicans don't, because they're lying.
Truth with a dose of sarcasm, right here on Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
It's hard work to host a show with a couple of knuckleheads.
Ken Webster Jr.
All right, stand by, everybody. We need more bumper music. Hold on. No, that's no good. Give me something better. What's this? No, that's no good either. We need something cooler than that to come back from break. Swing and a miss. I feel like I should have had this planned ahead of time. All right, that'll have to do. I have to play royalty-free bumper music when we come back from break. Normally, when we're just doing a regular radio show and social media is not involved, I could play pretty much anything I want because we have ASCAP licensing fees. But when you're on social media, we don't. So instead, I have to play this generic surf rock crap. Anyway, we're back from break. Greetings, kids. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, the FDA. Exciting news. The FDA just approved and updated the COVID-19 shots. New vaccines they call them, if that's even what they are. And, of course, you could trust the FDA, right? The FDA has approved updated COVID shots. Technically, I think the microchips inside the shots have been updated, but you get the point. Anyway, thanks so much for turning on your radio this afternoon or watching us on social media. And if you are watching us on social media, you probably know I used to do this radio show live every afternoon, and I would stream it on Facebook. And hundreds, sometimes thousands of people would watch in a single instance. We would get some really big numbers of people tuning in to watch my humble little radio show every afternoon. And then something happened. Right around, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 days after the 2020 election, we went from having this massive reach on social media to having almost no reach. Granted, our follower count didn't change. My morning show that I'm the co-host and executive producer of has about 500,000 followers on Facebook. And, you know, our radio listeners' demographic tends to skew a little older, but that's where they like to be, Facebook. And then we had some other followers in places like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You're familiar with these websites. Odds are you've probably used them for years. Now, after the 2020 election happened, that night we all went to bed thinking Donald Trump was the winner. You remember. You were there. And when you woke up the next morning, what happened? Weird. Even Fox News said Joe Biden won. Who got to these people? Why did everything suddenly change? And then in the days that followed, if you criticized vaccines or the election results or had anything to say about January 6th, suddenly your social media accounts in places not just Facebook or Instagram, but other websites like YouTube and Twitter, it was like you had a faucet that had water pouring out of it and someone just turned the tap and it stopped. Our Facebook analytics told us that right before the 2020 election, we were reaching about 80 million people a month with our massive Facebook following. And then a few days later, it was like 100,000. And then it was 10,000. What happened? It didn't make any sense. We know what happened. The algorithm was designed to censor conservative voices. We knew it at the time. And now a very unlikely person has come out and basically said that. But before I get to what he said, let's talk about what he said this week. Let's talk about what he said about a month ago. Donald Trump had just been shot. And instead of laying down and crying or dying, Donald Trump, with blood dripping out of his ear, stood up and said, "Fight, fight." And apparently one guy who has just recently decided to get really into mixed martial arts and weightlifting and started hanging out around a bunch of guys who I presume eat red meat and probably lean a bit to the right. Suddenly this guy, Mark Zuckerberg, the beta boy of soy boy cuckold beta bitches, had a change of heart about the Republican Party.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. The historic events over over the weekend. And, on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But
let's pause it right there. The red pilling of Silicon Valley. Could it be? Could it actually be happening? I don't know. It's too soon to say for sure. But I will tell you this, with the CEO of Telegram getting arrested the other day in France and the CEO of Rumble fleeing on a plane to get out of Europe as fast as he could. And let's not forget that antitrust lawsuit the DOJ has recently launched against Apple. Maybe people in Silicon Valley are starting to realize that with people like Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in charge of the Democrat Party, Silicon Valley CEOs aren't as bulletproof, figuratively speaking, against the almighty government as they previously thought that they were. So Mark Zuckerberg suddenly became a fan of Donald Trump recently, not something a lot of us were expecting. And then yesterday we learned that Mark Zuckerberg came out and admitted that at the end of the 2020 election, in the middle of the pandemic, just as January 6th was about to pop off, Mark Zuckerberg admitted the reason they were censoring news stories like Hunter Biden's laptop, for example, was because the federal government put them up to it. And people noticed. Here's a familiar face, Mr. Donald J. Trump. The J stands for genius.
So Mark Zuckerberg called me. First of all, he called me a few times. He called me after the event, and he said that was really amazing. It was very brave. And, you know, and he actually announced he's not going to support a Democrat because he can't, because he respected me for what I did that day. I think what I did maybe was to me, it was a normal response. But I was called by Mark Zuckerberg yesterday, the day before, on this same subject. And he actually apologized. He said they made a mistake, et cetera, and they're correcting the mistake. Google, nobody called from Google.
So we got a statement at Fox Business from Google. They said this fact check was initially applied to a doctored photo showing the Secret Service agents smiling. And in some cases, our systems incorrectly applied that fact check to the real photo. It has been fixed. We apologize for.
All right, let's pause it right there. So you guys get this, right? You've heard about this. If you're right-wing, libertarian, Republican, conservative, constitutionalist, populist, nationalist, whatever ist or ism you put after your description of what your ideological beliefs are, this was never supposed to happen. We've had PolitiFact and Snopes and all these third-party so-called fact-checking websites telling us that the hand in front of your face is not a hand that belongs to your body, but a fist of Donald Trump that's about to punch you, and you're supposed to be afraid of it. And what does Jesse Kelly always say? The sky is green and the grass is red, and whatever thing you think you can see as clear as day right in front of your face. We've had websites like PolitiFact and Snopes, which purportedly are actually operated by former intelligence agents, lying to us left and right. People that used to work at the CIA and the FBI are now in charge of deciding what's true and false on the internet. Yeah, it's pretty safe to say you're not crazy for being suspicious of this stuff. So we learned that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is now admitting to censoring information on the major social media platform, Facebook and Instagram, after having pressure from the Biden-Harris administration, that he is standing up and admitting this out loud. A lot of you might wonder, can we trust this guy? Well, look, for the time being, I think we have to remember, we're conservatives. We're right-wing thinkers. We reject cancel culture. Once upon a time, Elon Musk was a mouthpiece for the alphabet people and a climate change activist. And look how much he's changed. If it wasn't for Elon Musk, we wouldn't have Twitter and X. Maybe this is a sign of the times. Maybe we should embrace Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, okay, granted, it's probably too soon to be certain on that, but he wrote this letter to the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Jim Jordan. It was published yesterday. And Zuckerberg, as they explained at townhall.com, expressed regret for helping the Biden administration eliminate factual information about the COVID-19 pandemic from the internet. Now, you remember that whole thing about 6 feet social distancing? That was not based on a scientific study. They made that up. You remember the whole lab leak theory. Fauci actually told social media websites not to allow people to talk about that it was a far-fetched conspiracy theory. And then we learned why. Fauci and the National Institute of Health were actually funding the laboratory in China where they were doing the gain-of-function research that probably most likely created the COVID-19 pandemic. So the letter came in response to an inquiry from the committee about the Biden-Harris administration's ongoing efforts to censor speech online. The House Oversight Committee is investigating, and what we've learned is a few things here. The Biden-Harris administration pressured Facebook to censor Americans. Basically, we already knew that, but now Facebook's admitting it. We also knew that Facebook censored Americans. You know that. You probably got censored on Facebook. It's probably the reason a lot of you don't use that website anymore. And Facebook throttled the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is a big win for free speech. Looking back on it, everything's always 20/20 in hindsight. But as I'm live streaming this afternoon on social media, I can tell you right now, we still have a massive following on Facebook, and the damage was done because despite how many followers we have on Facebook, most of you aren't using it anymore. Right now, there are hundreds of people watching me on Twitter as I'm talking to you guys, a few hundred, and there's like a couple dozen watching me on Facebook. That's quite a difference, especially when you consider my Facebook page has more followers than my Twitter account does. So am I still being shadow banned, or did people just leave the platform? I guess either of those things is possible. And I'll wrap up this little rant with this. Mark Zuckerberg may have seen the light. Maybe hanging out with mixed martial artists and eating red meat and lifting weights has changed his way of thinking. Hell, John Fetterman went to the Walter Reed's hospital in Washington, D.C., and after his brain got fixed, he became more conservative, didn't he? So maybe that's happening to Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe not. Either way, at least for the time being, we have advocacy for the truth happening on social media. We have people in Silicon Valley realizing that liberal Democrats aren't always your friends. And while that isn't necessarily a win or a victory, it certainly is better than it could be.
Hello, my name is Pedro. My favorite things to do are smuggle drugs, procreate like a rabbit, and listen to Pursuit of Happiness Radio with producer Keeney. He's stupid.